and I wanted to do a compilation of pop punk bands. And, people were just, what? What does pop have to do with punk? I remember Grant Alden of the Rocket, which was a kind of the music magazine in Seattle at the time, and it was fairly famous. He wrote, "Oh, that's bullshit," like it's not a thing.
Hey everybody, welcome to 3 Gigs, the podcast that tells the stories of 3 shows that have had a profound effect on a performer's life and career. The very first performance, their best performance, and their worst performance. I'm your host, Dominic Davy, and today our guest is EAN HERNANDEZ from pop-punk legend Sicko, Top Drawer Records, and he's the man behind the upcoming Seattle Pop Punk Festival. This episode of 3 Gigs is brought to you by freshcleantees.com. It works like a shave club, but they send you t-shirts, super awesome t-shirts. And they have a special offer for all the listeners of 3 Gigs. Save 20% off your first order by going to freshcleantees.com and entering the coupon code GIG at checkout. That's freshcleantees.com with offer code GIG. Sicko was a pop-punk rock band from Seattle, Washington that formed back in 1991. And exceptionally, this 3-piece maintained a constant membership for every recording as a band. Damn, that's way better than any of my bands can boast. This lineup included EAN HERNANDEZ on guitar, bass, and vocals, Danny Bartlett on guitar, bass, and vocals, and Josh Rubin on drums, who actually, Josh was the brother of Aaron Rubin from Mr. T Experience, for those of you taking notes. The band wrote and recorded an extensive catalog of original material throughout the mid-1990s. It included 4 full-length albums, 5 7-inch EPs, as well as a retrospective CD with an unreleased and rare material, a released demo, and a tour video. And in 2009, Red Scare Records announced that they were reissuing the entire catalog. So it's all out there. EAN HERNANDEZ, speaking of record labels, would start well-known pop-punk record label Top Drawer Records and is currently promoting the Seattle Pop Punk Festival on January 19th and 20th, featuring a ton of pop-punk bands from Seattle, Washington. And the festival will feature a reunion of Sicko themselves. You know what? I'm just going to stop here, and I'm going to let EAN tell you all about it, because it's worth hearing it from the man himself.
Yeah, great. You can tell your friends, so I interviewed this geriatric pop-punk guy, and the first thing he said was, way back in 1993. And the story really starts there. Like, in the early 90s, we were, I was in this band called Sicko, and we liked pop punk, and we were in Seattle, and we were trying to get this off the ground, and I started this band off the ground, and that was a whole funny thing, just to find people who wanted to play music like that. And anyway, I had this little record label called Top Drawer Records. I still have it.
Right.
And we put out a lot of 7-inches. I think originally the idea was to be like the Sub Pop Singles Club, but it didn't really work out that way. But we were putting out these records, and I wanted to do a compilation of pop punk bands. And, people were just, what? What does pop have to do with punk? I remember Grant Alden of the Rocket, which was a kind of the music magazine in Seattle at the time, and it was fairly famous. He wrote, "Oh, that's bullshit," like it's not a thing, right? Anyway, we wanted to put this compilation out, and there was really no other pop punk bands in Seattle in the early 90s. It was us and the Fastbacks. And the Fastbacks had been there since the very end of the 70s, like 79 or 80, something like that. We had to go to San Francisco to get the Mr. T Experience. We had to go to Canada to get Bum and the Smugglers. We had to really kind of scratch our heads to find enough bands to go on a pop punk compilation. And it was...
that is really funny. Not to interrupt you, but that is really funny considering what happened later.
Oh my God, right?
I mean, I don't mean to interrupt because this is a great story, but like I had to just go,
no.
Considering what happened later, the fact that you had a hard time finding pop punk bands, amazing.
No, it's like 1959, some archivist digs out the Robert Johnson recordings from the 30s, and he's like, okay, I'm going to put out a blues record. People are like, what? That's a stupid idea. No one's going to care about the blues. And, like 15 years later, like everybody's dad can play a 12-bar blues. And it's like, that's kind of what happened. But at the time, no one cared. It was grunge, man. That's what people were into. Punk was kind of passé. People thought, oh, you guys are weird into like 70s music or something. That's old school, Anyway, so we wanted to do this. We wanted to do this compilation. We had to go all over the place to find enough people to play the music, and put together this compilation called 13 Soda Punks. And we sold a bunch of it for a number of years. I still have a couple left in my basement, and through Top Floor Records, a mail order. But it's sort of taken on an air of being one of the early, maybe, kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't want to say formative or anything like that, but certainly people said, yeah, I really didn't know about this music until I heard that, or it's got some of the kind of great original bands, and from that time, and so it's got some legs in terms of being a legitimate compilation record. Anyway, you sort of fast forward through time, and Sicko kind of wound down at the end of the 90s. Label wound down. I moved overseas, went to grad school, lived abroad for quite some time, and I was pretty much out of it. And I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on the radio or on MTV. I didn't really own a television for like 15 years, so I had music, but it was stuff I knew, and listening to like J Church records and stuff, so I wasn't really following what was going on. So came back to Seattle in the sort of early 20-teens, and I want to get a band together, so I started playing some music with some friends, and I went to Brian Foss, who, I don't know if you know Brian, but he runs the Funhouse, which is, you're in Seattle, right?
Actually, I'm out of the Bay Area. I live in Berkeley.
Oh, yeah, okay. So Brian, that's the home of the pop punk right there, the East Bay.
I'm at ground zero.
We had that. Yeah, really. I mean, that for us there was two important, just to segue a little bit, there was two important homes for us of music, like spiritual homes for Sicko. One was absolutely the East Bay. So the early Lookout stuff, Green Day, Cringer, Mr. T Experience, all that stuff was that kind of inspired us to start doing this music. 39 Smooth was getting played a lot when I was in college, and in our living room. Mm-hmm. The other real home of sort of inspiration was Olympia. So bands like Beat Happening and Mecca Normal and Girl Trouble and all that stuff that sort of, some people call it, underground pop. I think it's probably the right way to refer to it. That music was the other sort of thing that informed the way we thought about music. But to sort of come back to the story, so, fast forward, I went to Brian Foss. Brian runs this great club in Seattle for many years now called the Fun House, and he's really one of the pillars of the local punk community. He's always provided a space for us to play music in. It's been in a couple different locations, but he's always been there for us. He also runs he also is one of the DJs on KEXP on Sonic Reducer, which is the local punk radio show on Saturday night. And so he's he's a real fixture and a real supporter. And I sort of went to him and I said, hey, Bri, look, are there any pop punk bands? Do people do that anymore? And not really knowing, what was going on. And he said, sure. And he introduced me a couple of guys and gave me a couple of names of bands. And I called these guys like West, Keller, Hunter Keller, who's also a DJ on KXP, guys like Rev Peters from Success, guys like Chris Crusher from Shadowcats. And I just started asking them, hey, what are some cool pop punk bands in town? And I started getting bigger and longer lists. And I started going out and seeing these bands. And it was amazing in a number of ways. One, it just happens to be the music that I love. Like, it could have been nu metal, but it's not. It's pop punk. And I love pop punk, and I've always loved pop punk. So it's just great to see it being done. That just makes me happy. Two, there's like 3 or 4 clubs in Seattle now that play punk rock music. And there wasn't a lot of that actually in the 90s. It's kind of hard to get gigs for punk bands because, everybody wanted to see alternative or, indie or grunge or, all these other sort of sounds. So there wasn't a whole lot of venues were doing what we were doing. It's particularly not dedicated to that. And then I think 3, you see the same people playing in the bands and going to each other's shows. And that, I just love that. You go out to see the 4 Lights, and there's the guys from the Botherations and Foxhole Norman in the audience watching the 4 Lights. And if you go to a Foxhole show, you're going to see the 4 Lights at the show. And I thought, wow, this is great. It's like a real community. And, in a sense, better than it was back in the day. In a lot of senses, better than it was back in the day. And so I kind of thought, well, geez, I really ought to get back to doing this label and maybe, do another version of a compilation because it seems like there's actually something to document here.
That must have been really exciting. That alone must have been really exciting to just turn around and discover. Like, how fun.
It was. It really was. And they were nice to me. They're like, okay, we'll let the old guy play the shows too. And, they let me kind of hang around with them. And so they're nice guys and really welcoming. And, I just thought, yeah, it's a legit, there's a lot of bad reasons to do comps. There's a million bad comps. I think that occasionally there is a good reason to do a compilation. My wife is still dubious on that. She's like, really, Ian, a punk rock compilation? That's going to be a good idea. And I'm like, yeah. And the thing that's different this time is these are all great pop punk bands. Instead of 13, there's 14. It's called 14 Soda Punks this time. And they're all from Seattle. Like, they are all, you had to be a Seattle band. I didn't even take Tacoma bands on this. And, which is sad because there are some great Tacoma bands that could have gone on it. But it is, and the truth is that there's another LP's worth of great pop punk bands in the city that I could have done. I could have done a double album for sure with this, but I wanted to just kind of keep it as a single package. And so that was sort of really that, I guess that's probably the long and winding version, but that's what happened. I felt really compelled to document something that looked like a legitimate, thriving, breathing, real thing. And it just happens to be my hometown, and it happens to be the music that I love. So that's how it all came about. And then, from there, we started talking about doing a record release party. And basically, we wanted to have all of the bands, so 14 bands, all of them play. And a few of them have actually moved away since. So getting them back here, that was a little bit of organizing to get that done. We also wanted to have a few bands from the original 13 Soda Punks. And so I spoke to Bum, the guys from Victoria, and they are back together playing again. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they are, just incredible songwriters and performers, and one of the coolest sort of pop punk bands of the 90s. And then I also spoke to the guys from the Fastbacks, who they don't have their singer anymore. Their lead singer, Kim, moved away. And so they do Fastbacks. What they do is they do what they call Seattle's premier Fastbacks cover band with all the Fastbacks except for her, and then some folks filling in. And they only play Fastback songs. So I get to see Kurt Bloch and Mike Musburger and Lou Gargillo, doing these great songs that I've been loving, since the 80s. And it's too bad we can't have Kim sing, but they were willing to come. They call themselves the K Streets, which is the name of one of their K Street is the name of one of their songs. So that's going to be awesome. People love to see that. I love to see that. And then I was sort of thinking about, that was all going to go on Saturday night because those two bands wanted to play together on the same night. And I thought, well, for Friday night, there's no old bands, and I got to find one of the old bands to try and play. And I really didn't know who was going to do it. I thought I might get, I might just have to let it go. And I had the idea of just, seeing if maybe Sicko would get up for 3 songs, and just play a couple songs. People might think that was cool. It's a set of people that like that music and knew that band, and the old people and a lot of the younger guys too. So I just wrote Denny and Josh, and they're really good friends. We're all really close. We've worked together and, hang out together. And we still all live in Seattle. And I said, hey, guys, would you be willing to play 3 songs? We didn't have to switch around instruments or nothing. We can just get up there and quickly do it. It'd be fun. And Denny said, sure. And then Josh said, well, if we're going to play 3, we're going to have to practice. Why don't we, let's do a set. Let's do a whole set. And okay. And that was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. And then we've been just sort of woodshedding since then, just trying to practice to get back up to be able to play these really fast songs. And so we're practicing a lot, multiple times a week for lots of hours to try and get it back going. I mean, it's kind of hard music to play, and sort of physically demanding. So it's definitely been a process. We decided to have a kind of a sneaky show, and just played a friend of mine's birthday party as a unknown band. I said, oh, these are my stupid friends that play a few Sicko songs. Can they open the show? And he said, sure. And then we played Sicko, which was a cool surprise for him. And it was, we told just a couple of friends, and we got to sort of have a practice show to see what it's like to play in front of people. And again, after, I think it's been 15 years now.
Right.
And that went pretty good.
That's awesome.
Anyway, so we got, our band for Friday night. We got our old band for Friday night going. There's been some people here in Seattle that have been pretty glad about that, I think. And we just played on KXP 2 nights ago and did a video recording with them. And people are seeming to buy a few tickets and stuff. So it looks like it could be a pretty cool, it looks like it's going to be a pretty fun weekend. We've even got in the middle of the 2 days. So Friday, we've got 7 bands, and Saturday we've got 10 bands. And this isn't sort of a back to their stages at either end of the room in the club. So you can have one band setting up while the other one's playing, which is pretty cool. And then on the Saturday morning, we're going to a ton of people are going to meet for brunch, for dim sum brunch in the International District here in Seattle. So we're trying to make it a little bit of an event, a social event beyond just the gig itself. So that's kind of what's going on. I probably just blew about 35 minutes of your life on that, so I'm sorry.
Not at all. This is exactly what I want. I want to tell people about what you're doing and the fact that that's amazing that Sicko is back and is going to be playing a show, and it's a big festival, and this is happening. I mean, I hope this... I wish you nothing but success with this. I hope this becomes a thing that that expands and continues from here. I think that would be really amazing for your guys' scene. I mean, Kevin Lyman always...
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Kevin Lyman says all the time about, you got a problem with Warped Tour, start your own festival. And it's like, right on, man. Just start your own festival. That's amazing.
Yeah, actually, well, first of all, thanks for saying that. That's really kind of you. And, I think that is the kind of open question. Could it be something we could figure out a way to do? And what is it going to mean? And what's it going to say? And, I'm not quite sure about that. I guess my intuition at this point is that it will be cooler if it is a Seattle thing and you have to be from Seattle to be on it. And I know it's a little exclusive. I like the notion of developing Seattle's image as as a place where this kind of music is happening, which it is, right? I think the message isn't there, out there as much as it should be, but I think it is in terms of the volume of bands and support in the clubs. I think it would be pretty neat if we could start sort of building the idea, regionally and nationally, that this is a place where people play this kind of music, and it is a home for that, and it's got a scene around that, and it might create a little bit of interest and energy around it. And I think that's I think first and foremost, that's it's the truth. The Fastbacks have been doing this since the late 70s, and they're still doing it. And there's a long tradition all through the following decades of people doing this kind of music, and it's very Seattle. In my way of thinking, and the kind of bands I like, more for me than that sort of heavy grunge kind of stuff. But that's just my angle. And I'm more of a Fastbacks and Young Fresh Fellows fan than I am a Pearl Jam Soundgarden fan. I guess, so maybe it can be a thing. We'll see how this one goes and how much trouble I get in at home for it, and if people are really interested or not. We'll see.
Yeah, no, it sounds awesome. Well, that's fantastic. Where should anybody, if they're looking and they're hearing about this, because I do have a lot of listeners in the Northwest, where should they go for information on this festival?
Yeah, if you just go to seattlepoppunkfestival.com, it'll take you to the Facebook page for the Seattle Pop Punk Festival. And it's got all the information about how to get tickets online, when to show up. If you follow the page, you can get, various announcements. And we're really encouraging people to take lots of pictures, lots of video, not just of bands, but of friends, and new and old, funny stuff that happened, dumb stuff that happened, whatever, and just try to, capture the story of it a little bit online for folks. And my hope is that from that it'll develop a little bit of momentum.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Well, thank you for telling me all about it. You gave us a lot of information, but now I get to ask you the 3 questions I ask everybody.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So tell me about the very first show you ever played. The show that made you go, all right, I like this. This is what I want to do.
Okay. And it could be, does it need to be in Sicko, or it can be just in any band?
It can be anything. It's your story to tell. You pick the stories to tell. Basically, when I ask these questions, this whole show is based around the concept of the conversations I have at shows with different musicians and stuff where we talk about it. And I thought it would be really good to focus on the first show a person plays and performs, the story of that, because that's the show that made you go, oh, I like this. I want to keep doing this. And then the best show that ever happened, which made you go, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I love doing this. And then the worst show, that makes you go, what the hell have I done? Why am I doing this?
Why am I here?
And I get a lot of great stories out of it. I don't know if you've heard the show, but it's interesting what I hear from people. what they have to say. And everybody, I find that no matter the size of the musician, I'm not just talking to musicians, I mostly talk to musicians, no matter the size of the performer, I should say, because I have like wrestlers and actors coming up, in the show. But it's like, you get a really interesting story about like what made them do this, like what the kind of person they are. So that's what I'm asking you. What is your first show? And it could be the Sicko, or
sure,
it could be you.
Okay. I'll do it with the first punk band I played in college. I was at Washington State University, and I'd always liked music, and I'd never really been in a band, certainly not a punk band. Played shows. And these friends of mine had a band called Baby So High. And Baby So High was, I don't know, it sounded like somewhere between punk rock and Rush. It was sort of, there were elements of both in it. So it was this kind of prog rock, poppy, punk music. Which there's probably a few good songs in there, actually, but it's all lost to history now. Their bass player, I think, graduated mid-year, and then they asked me to fill in. And I could play guitar, and I was actually on bass. I wanted to play bass, and we were friends, and so it was sort of a natural thing. And there was this big house called the Greenhouse that had all of these. So this old Victorian house was giant and had all of these keggers in the basement. And so you pay money and see bands and drink, cheap crummy beer. And I remember going there, loading all our gear and, picking the right shirt and, all this stuff, getting ready for this gig, my first gig, and we'd been practicing for a month or something like that. And the songs were easy. We were playing a bunch of covers. Like we were playing Rise Above by Black Flag, and we were playing Lobotomy by the Ramones. And hey, I'm on the phone. Can you do that some more, please? Thank you. And, a few songs we'd written as well. And I was pretty nervous. I was super, super, super nervous. And the old bass player, who is a really good friend of mine, we went to be roommates later on after I graduated, he had this, tradition of playing Henry Rollins' spoken word, as a way to kind of get amped up for the show. So before the show, and they kept it after he left, we would go to a bedroom or, back room or something and sequester ourselves and find, a tape player, boom box, and play this tape of this Henry Rollins spoken word. And, it's that real sort of ultra creepy, negative, I'm sure you're familiar with Black Flag. That stuff was kind of it was real angsty, and that was kind of that. Punk's different then. We don't really, it's not like that now. It's one of those things that's really different, is people are not nearly as angry and hateful as they once were in this music scene. And so we were supposed to get amped up on that. And, I was just so nervous I could barely move my finger. And I was just, I was trying to play the bass, trying to warm up, and I spent 20 minutes trying to loosen my fingers up so that I could actually get out there and do it. And we came out, got up there, and a lot of friends just packed. They had a barrier, so that people wouldn't come in on top of the band, and this creaky old basement, which, I'm surprised the ceiling never fell in, right? It was a total, it wasn't a squat, but it was just one level up from that. And we started with Lobotomy. And the thing about Lobotomy is it's I think the drums start and the singing starts and then the bass starts and then the guitar comes in. And there's a measure of the bass just playing by itself. Well, playing with the drums and the singer. And I came in I don't know where I came in, but it wasn't the right place. And the whole song just started to sound completely backwards. It was like this whirlwind of goofed up sound. And I, you know, it was, I was like, oh man, I have really screwed this up. And I was just kind of heart racing, could barely think, hands clenching and not really playing the bass and not playing at the same time as the rest of the band. And the guys are looking at me like, oh no, he's, you know, choking. And it was all a fiasco, right? It was terrible. And that was just the first song.
Oh, geez.
So, yeah. It's like I think I'd have anxiety nightmares about stuff like that now, you know. And then,
so sorry. I know the feeling. That's why I'm sitting here going, I'm so sorry.
I feel bad for that poor kid. I kind of hardly even remember what it was like to be him, but I feel bad for him. And I remember that I was trying to date this girl, and she and I had gone to some like kitschy, kind of like a Archie McPhee's kind of kitschy junk shop, and we had bought all these little plastic babies. They're like, you know, little figurines like an inch tall, and built a bracelet out of it, like with string and the babies. So I had this bracelet of these weird little plastic babies, and they were sharp and hard, but I thought it was kind of, you know, punk, right? You know, so wacky. And that was just like getting caught on the strings and poking into my arm, and I couldn't get it off, and it really hurt. And the whole thing was just a fiasco. And that was the first 2 minutes, you know, the first 2.5 minutes of my rock and roll career. And then I guess what happened next is we played Rise Above by Black Flag. And I've always been more of a Black Flag guy than a Ramones guy. That kicked in, and we were all playing at the same time, which is great. People went nuts. And that was always a weird thing about playing Black Flag songs. Like, you could be anywhere. For Sicko was doing that song for a while. It kind of stuck with us over the years in various guises. And you could be playing the most sedate show, and then you play a Black Flag song, and there's like a circle pit, and people are hitting each other, and like, you know, but it gets violent. And I mean, Sicko had that happen one time at the Lake Union Pub, and so people went nuts, and it was awesome. And so I had sort of gone from like the depths of despair to the heights of like sort of, I don't know if you've had this experience, but there's this thing that happens when the band is all on, and the audience has this energy, and then it sort of comes back at you. You sort of feel in the movement of the people in the audience, the reflection of the movement coming from your instruments, and it is a very powerful drug. That sort of synchronization of emotion. And so I had just gone from like, you know, rock bottom to the top of Mount Everest in, you know, 4 minutes.
Oh my God.
And I guess I thought, oh yeah, well, I need this kind of abuse in my life. So I stuck with it. So there you go. There's my first show.
My favorite quote is, I need this kind of abuse in my life, which it seems to be, that's a good summary of how literally my life has felt with music. And yes, I do know what it's like to really get the crowd to just sync with your band and have that moment that is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe to somebody who hasn't experienced it, you know, who's sitting there.
It's strange.
Like, yeah, it's this really weird effect where all of a sudden it just
works. The only other thing I can really think of that's sort of like that, have you ever, this is not like quite a segue, but have you ever rowed in a crew boat?
A crew? No, actually, I have not.
Well, so I went to Oxford and did my MBA at Oxford, graduate degree at Oxford, and everybody rows there. I mean, almost nobody doesn't row. And you go out on the Thames in the morning and you row in these teams. And I was in the worst boat ever. Like there's each college there's the university has their teams. Then there's the team, the Blues they're called, and then each college has their team, and then they have the sort of A, B, C, D, E, crummy teams, and I was on whatever D or something like that, like a really like these guys are just losers, and they're for people like me who'd never done it before, so but it was a lot of fun, and the thing about rowing is you're in this, it's like kind of like a weird stretched out canoe. Like it's like about 3 inches deep. It's about a foot wide. It's, I don't know, 20 feet long. You put, I guess, maybe 8 or 9 guys in it. And you have these giant oars, which are totally unwieldy. And there's a guy sitting in the very back of the boat called the coxswain that steers the boat with a rudder that's controlled with string, and the rudder is like the size of a playing card. And so it's a real kind of uncontrolled thing. And you can't see anything. You're just jammed into the next guy in front of you, and you're rowing. So you all have to row exactly in precision. Every stroke has to be exactly synchronized, and it has to be done across the whole boat, or you will literally spin in a circle and bang your oars and not go anywhere. And so you develop this very strange sort of nonverbal communication with people and with the person in front of you and the person behind you, and thereby through the entire boat of how we're, what the next movement of your body is going to be as you're sort of rhythmically rowing, speeding up, slowing down through the process of throwing this boat. And that's really the only thing like it that I can think of. It's this nonverbal sort of human rhythmic communication that brings you together, and it's a pretty incredible feeling when a boat actually works like that as well. It's really actually kind of amazing to move this hunk of junk through the water and get somewhere quite fast, actually, all working together. It doesn't last long. It usually falls apart. But, something like that. That's the only thing I can really think of.
No, and I think that's a really good analogy. I always joked, being a comic book nerd, I always joked that, like, comic books get it all wrong when they try to write about the X-Men or tell everything about how these supergroups work out. It's like, Jesus, you want to understand what a superhero group would be like, go follow a band around, see how dysfunctional and functional at the same time that they are, and you understand how the X-Men really are. Like, do you want to know what the Avengers are like? Pick a band, follow them, see how that goes. You're gonna learn a lot. Literally
minute to minute, highs to lows. You never know what to expect.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe. You're gonna get a real eyeful. So I've always floated. I do comics, but I'm not super into superhero comics at this point in my life. So it's like I've resisted the idea of doing a superhero comic. But I'm like, oh my god, if I did, I have it. I have everything. I have everything I could possibly need to tell people about what this experience is like.
There is a huge. I think that's right. That makes sense. It's like four main characters. All vying for the same, whatever.
Yeah, so that's that's great. I think there's a wonderful story. I totally understand. I completely feel that younger youth's pain of playing like that. Oh God, I feel so bad. I know so well what you went through. But tell me about let's talk about one of your favorite shows of all time. Like, when's a moment that you're like, oh my God, this is awesome.
And this is one that I played on, yeah?
Yeah, you performed.
Or one I went to.
Or one you performed on. One of your favorite performances of all time.
Sure. I guess there's a number of sort of strange little high points over the years. If I was gonna, I guess probably the most just sort of crazily euphoric show. I mean, there are shows where you play with a band that you thought was great, or your really good buddies came, but we got involved with some labels in Japan that were doing Japanese pop punk bands, but also bringing over American pop punk bands, and some even big ones. Like they brought over NoFX and actual kind of well-known acts, and they would also do import versions of the records. And so it was kind of fun because you'd go over and play in Japan, and people would have your record, and they'd bring you there, and you play shows and get to sort of experience a very different culture. And you could sort of be a rock star for a week. The weird thing about Japan is that people take the process of being a fan of music very seriously, and there's not a lot of shame in it. I think if one of my rock heroes was sort of loading out the back of the club and I saw him there getting into the van, I would steal a glance and guiltily sort of slink away. But in Japan, there's like 200 people there, mobbing them, asking for photos and signatures, and that's, everybody gets treated like that there. It's very weird. I signed more autographs in one tour in Japan than in all the years of touring I did in the U.S., and that was a lot of fun. But anyway, we went out there a couple of times, and the second time we went having done two relatively smart things. One, we had released a Japanese version of our new CD. At the time, it was called You're Not the Boss of Me, on the local Japanese label, which is neat because you get the Japanese CD and it has like kanji fonts, and Japanese specific stuff on it. So it's kind of like, but it's, just a version of your CD. So it's pretty cool. But we had also covered a song by a band called Husking Bee that we had toured with. And they wrote a song called 8/6, which is how they refer to the date of the Hiroshima bombing. The singer of the band was actually from Hiroshima. And so it was a very personal song for him about, that sort of terrible event back at the end of World War II. So we covered that song, which is a real good song anyway, on the CD. So we went back to Japan for a second tour, and we were playing 3,000 people clubs opening for Husking Bee. And everybody knew our songs. And Japanese audiences at the time they would go bananas. First of all, it would be a small space, like not 3,000 American space, like, 1,500 in the U.S., they'll put 3,000 Japanese people in there. One, because they don't have the same standards of kind of space there. Also, too, I think, in general, they're a lot smaller than us here, so you can get a few more people in. But they would just be packed to the gills, and people crowd surfing and stage diving and all this sort of mayhem, which, was pretty fun. And, to get up on a stage, and it would be, it was 100% humidity in there, just slick. The stage, the first couple bands had played. I think Husky Bee would open one night, and we would open the other night. I think that I've still got video of it somewhere. We get up on the stage, and it's like 110 degrees up there. It's boiling, and it's like condensation is dripping off of everything. Another thing about Japan is ventilation is not the same as it is here. I don't know why that is, but they just rooms are more stuffy. There's not a big HVAC sucking air out, or cigarette smoke for that matter. And so I remember the three of us coming on stage and just, oh my God, it's so hot up here. We have to start playing right this second because we're going to die if we go more than 3 minutes over our normal set length. We are, like Josh had this, my wife describes it. She says it's the struggle written all over his face, the struggle face came out, the drummer, and he's like, oh no, this isn't going to work, kind of thing. And so we just got right up there, and we, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it just exploded. The room went nuts, and people are singing along, and they're loving the songs that we wrote, and and then the cover that we did of 8/6, and just at the end, and shouting and jumping and singing it back to us, and that's just a really special feeling to have a couple thousand people, so excited about an idea that you had and you thought was a pretty good idea, and to have them sort of, I guess it's kind of back to what we talked about earlier, sort of reflect that energy back to you in this so almost sort of intimidatingly high volume way. It's a little scarier. A crowd with 50 excited people is awesome, but 3,000 excited people is a little scary, actually. Finished up the set, and spent an hour selling T-shirts and signing autographs, autographing records, autographing autograph books, autographing T-shirts, posing for. We didn't have sort of the selfie in terms of mobile phones at the time, but it was real common to take pictures with people there. People always wanted to have a picture with members of the band that they liked, and so it was very, it was a great show because it was just all the things you would want. You had a real success. People knew the music. They were really excited. They were glad to see you. There was that, that exchange of energy we talked about. Then I think afterwards, to be a touring band and, to have people want your merchandise and want your signature, for crying out loud. I mean, that's really cool. It's you get to feel very special. That was right at the end of Sicko, though. So, to sort of bring it back down to earth, I remember we got back and we had, we felt like rock stars, right? Staying in hotels, flying in planes, all this kind of stuff. And we were feeling pretty special. And we came back, and our booking agent called us, 2 weeks after we got back. And she said, hey, I got a show for you. I don't know if you want to play it, but here's a show in town. And what was it? Well, it turned out the Queers were coming to town.
Oh, wow.
And we've been making, without going into money, but we've been making very good, very good sales and very good door receipts in Japan. And and she said, well, the Queers are coming to town. They want you to open, and they're going to pay you $50. And I just thought, oh my gosh, really? Like, I think pop punk is over in the United States. Like, no one cares anymore. And it was such a letdown after this sort of high of being successful for a hot moment, and sort of coming back to that. And I just thought, oh God, $50 to open for the Queers on a Wednesday night. This is this is like this is the end of this is like the bell ringing at the end of class, time to get out.
Right.
So it was a great show on a great tour, but it kind of came back to a reality that was sort of like, brought us right back down to earth very quickly.
Right. Yeah, I imagine that would. I mean, I've definitely had that experience, and we've had a lot of people on the show, and I have to somewhat agree that talk about how some of the best shows have been overseas for bands that have been able to go overseas and experience it. There's been a lot of theories put forth on this show from different musicians about why that is, but I definitely would say that there's something to I guess it's just something too, like Americans are tougher. You know, they're a tougher crowd to win over and get going and lose themselves in the moment. Not that they haven't, because they have, and we get plenty of great stories of American shows too. But if I'm talking to a band that's toured 9 times out of 10, they're gonna say the best show was in Europe or Japan. And I have to say, you know, I had some really amazing moments. Japan, our Tsunami Bomb going to Japan was one of the highlights of my life. I can't wait to go back.
Yeah.
You know, and we're already starting to talk to people about like trying to arrange going back, and I really want to. I don't even care if nobody shows up. But
well, it's just, I mean, that's just it. I mean, there is, you know, being recognized. No one's in a band. I mean, so you know this just as well as anybody does. You know, you play music because you love it, right? Yeah. And you like to play music and write songs and create and all that stuff. But nobody's in a band to not get recognized for what they're doing. You know, you want people to say, "Hey, good job, man!" And it's a very powerful. Again, it's a powerful drug to get that recognition. To have someone say to you, "Yeah, good job. You're cool. You're smart. I feel your heart," and that's a big thing. I think what's interesting about that, though, the sort of go away, you know, the joke is always, "Oh, you're big in Japan, ha ha ha," right? I mean, that's a joke that's as old as the hills. And you know, the lesson I sort of took out of it was the sort of mental toughness that you have to really do this. You know, on an ongoing basis, you know, that sort of resilience, that's not a common level of resilience. It's not something that, you know, your average guy like me sort of, you know, just woke up with. We struggle, you know, in a lot of ways. You know, you hear people talk about how success, you know, it can be harder to handle than failure. You know, you did okay when you were failing, but in a minute of success and everything goes to pieces, and it makes things more difficult. And that was tough for us to have that success and then not have it stay with us, you know, 2 weeks later was hard to swallow. And I think that was one of the things that was sort of doomed us, was that we couldn't get successful a little bit and then handle sort of bouncing back from that, if that makes sense.
Right. It is a tough thing, because that's the other thing. Like, the other comment I have is the thing that a lot of people who listen to this show and who go to shows, even who go to shows a lot, don't realize is that when you're in a band, by no means is your draw uniform. You're not necessarily huge everywhere, and there's a very different response to you depending on where you go, how known you are, how often you've played there, what kind of relationship you've built there. So it's definitely not guaranteed. So you will go from those extreme high moments where people will see you on this massive stage in front of this massive crowd, part of a festival or part of this, whether it's Warped Tour or it's in Japan or whatever, and then you go and then you play Nebraska and you're playing to 2 people. and like you're like, well, the 2 people came, so we gotta play.
You're turning the conversation to my next story.
I'm setting it up for you, man. I'm lining it up. You're gonna be able to just bowl it down. I'm setting you up. You can do the layup. You're ready to go. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that's something that people don't know. They just don't know how it goes like that. I mean, and you know, it's like everybody I talk to is like, all right, somebody showed up. We got to give a show. We got to give it, like, if one person came out, it matters. You know, we're about ready to do another show. We're going to be playing soon. And I'm not going to lie. I've heard from people who are saying, yeah, I'm coming down from Oregon, from Seattle. I'm going to come down to see the show, or I'm driving up from LA. And I'm like, oh my God, we have to do a good job. It's like, not that I was planning to not go into the job, but I just, so people understand, like, that does affect us all, where we hear that and we're like, oh man, like, if people are coming from far away and they're really, really taking this seriously. We really got to do it. We really got to deliver it. Yeah. So it does really matter, and it affects us. Like, when you play a show to a bunch of people who don't care, It hurts, or no one shows up.
It hurts. It hurts.
It hurts.
It hurts. Yep. It hurts. No, you stand there. And I mean, we used to have fun with it. We toured a lot. So Josh's brother, Josh, our drummer, his brother Aaron was a bass player for the Mr. T Experience for many years. And he, so we kind of got hooked up with them. I mean, of course, the only person in Seattle that we could find that actually likes pop punk has to be someone, you know, who's, you know, got connections to the East Bay, because, you know, there wasn't that many of us back then, right? It's like everybody knew each other because there was 50 people in the whole country that cared about this kind of music. But so Aaron was the bass player of the Sicko Experience, and we got to do some touring with them. In fact, even after he split and went to Sam I Am, and they got Joel, their third bass player, we were still touring with them. And Frank Portman from Mr. T Experience, he had very, very intellectual, very intelligent guy and funny guy. And, you know, I've always thought Frank probably would have been a university professor if he hadn't have been a musician. And he used to say this thing at the end of the set. He would say, "Thanks for facing us while we played."
Yeah. Ugh.
And it was, you know, you have little things like that to the set. He's like, "Oh, it's not much longer now. Don't worry." You know, just stuff to be like super self-deprecating and sort of mocking the situation, you know. And we certainly did a few shows with them that were like that. They weren't always, you know, they had a lot of appeal and a lot of draw even then. But there were plenty of times when we were together that we were, wow, this is a super bad show.
Yeah, I don't mean to bum you guys out, but this sucks. Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
but those are the easy ones. Here's one. I think this is the worst show ever.
Okay, I set you up. Here you go.
Yeah.
The worst show.
Yeah, I think it's easy to say, the show that we didn't play, that Joe Queer offered us $50 to open for him on Wednesday night, you know, after our triumphant tour to Japan. You know, and that'd be easy. It'd be easy to say the time when we literally played to a guy and his dog, or we could say the time that is sort of enshrined on the literally sound guy and his dog, or the time we played in Eastern Washington. It's actually sort of enshrined on the cover of our first record, which is called "You Can Feel the Love in This Room," which the cover is us standing on stage, like looking at each other, you know, and Denny saying, "Yeah, you can feel the love in this room." It's like a cartoon. We always had cartoon artists draw our covers, and it's everybody's going out the last one person is going out the door, and it happened actually. We were playing, I think it was at the Hoedown in Richland, I want to say, and like a kind of, you know, one of these sort of farm country dance hall type of deals, and there was a fight outside, and everybody left. And we were playing. But that's not the story I'm going to tell you. The story I'm going to tell you is, so we were in Wichita, Kansas, where I'm pretty sure nothing good ever happened, but maybe I'm wrong. We were driving through on our first big tour, where we went all the way to the Midwest, to the Southwest and California, and came back up. And we got to this place. It looked like it had been a McDonald's or something like that. I don't know. It was sort of freestanding, sort of modern building, or maybe it had been like a chain restaurant at some point. But it was a bar. And we got there and went in, and there's like this sort of punk rock looking guy there, and this big sort of punk dude, and then the lady working the bar. And the lady working the bar walk up to her and say, "Hi, we're from Sicko. We are on tour, and we're scheduled to play here tonight. So can we load in?" And this was like 3 p.m. She says, I don't know what you're talking about, and I said, okay,
always a good sign.
So, yeah, you've been in touch with the Lobotomy Talent Group, right? That's our booking agency. She says, I know. And we're like, oh, geez, great. Glad we drove to Wichita for this. And so she goes, but, if you want to play here, you can. And we were like, well, we've got nothing else to do tonight. So, and this is sort of first tour spirit, fine, we'll play the show. So we're loading our gear in. And the punk dude, literally the only other person in the bar, he comes up and says, hey, how's it going? Chatting us up. And he's like, I didn't think much of the time. He sort of had real short hair and like combat boots. You could tell he was into like, punk rock music. Right. And he said, so what kind of music do you like? We said, what kind of music are you playing? We said punk rock. He goes, oh, wow, really? That's awesome. We almost never get punk around here. I got a whole bunch of friends that would love this. Let me go tell them about tonight. They'll come down and see you, man. And we're like, oh, my God, this is so lucky, right? The lady's going to let us play. There's the one punk rocker in the whole city, and he happens to be here, and he's going to get his friends. And we're like, this could actually, turn out to be a good night. And so we set up, tune up, ready, sound check, boobity-boo, and he shows up, it's showtime, right? He shows up with his friends at 9. His friends are a skinhead gang, and they're like, we're not just talking, some kind of like lame-ass West Coast sharp skin kind of thing. We're talking about guys with swastikas on their heads, like a guy with I'll never forget this one guy. There was the guy with the double S's on the necks and the swastikas on their elbows and all that stuff. But the one with the German army helmet with a swastika on it, tattooed onto the side of his head, I just thought, you've got a helmet on the side of your head, bro. That is so hardcore. That's like the most effed up thing I've ever seen, right?
Oh
what is wrong with you? And you got to understand, Josh is a Jew. I'm Hispanic. And Danny's the only one. He's Irish. I don't know if Irish get a pass or not with those guys, but me and Josh are definitely not on the in crowd with those guys. And so, these guys pulling, and they're all there with the laces and the big shoes and the shaved heads and the scary, white power tattoos and shit. And these guys brought beer steins. They had these big, goofy German beer steins with the lid on it, the gold lid and everything. And they're there drinking these beer steins, sitting there in the chairs, waiting for us to start. And we get up on stage. And usually I had this thing when we would play. This is really childish that I did this, but I thought it was pretty cool. When I was a young man, and we would go and play in Wenatchee, Washington, or, Los Gatos, or, somewhere obscure, right? Somewhere kind of off the beaten path. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people hadn't seen a lot of punk rock, right?
Right.
And, somewhere in the middle of Nebraska, they hadn't seen a ton of it. And so I would say something smart. I would say, consider this a lesson in punk. And, and we go, what did they want? And we play our songs, which were, pretty actually tame. And we're fast and hard band, but they're, pretty pop music, not really heavy or negative. So it was a little bit tongue in cheek, but also a little bit, we'll show you how cool we are. And I think some people thought that was funny. Anyway, there was usually that sort of banter before we started. And I remember Denny looking over at me, stepping up to the mic. He says, Ian, don't say anything. I looked back at him. I said, I know, Denny. We played this set. And the worst part about the evening, I think, is that the skinheads loved us.
Oh.
They thought we were fantastic. They were dancing and cheering with their beer mugs and saluting each other and all this shit. And we're just like, how are we getting out of here alive? And afterwards, they're like, oh, yeah, I saw your roadie. He has short hair. I thought he might be a shark. We might have to beat him up. And we're like, no, man. He just has short hair. That's all, man, And they were just going on about all the nastiest, sort of, imagine what skinheads talk about. That's what they're talking about. And we're just trying to, get out of there without getting killed. And they bought our shirts. They bought our music. And I remember, oh yeah. And they were like, one of them was like, one of them really buddied up to our poor little skinny roadie, Garen, our friend who'd come along for the ride. And I just remember sitting there, and this guy's got his arm around Garen, and Garen's just got this look of pure, terror, agony. And this skinhead just loves him. Just, hey, bro, if you let us know if you need anybody to, protect you, you guys are, need somebody to kick some ass for you at a show, you just call us, and all this stuff. Anyway, so we get out of there after the show. And we did not get beaten up, nor did we get exposed.
No, it sounds like they loved you.
Wrong. No, they loved us, yeah. We did not get exposed for being, the wrong whatever that they don't like.
Right.
And I remember the next morning, we went to Safeway to get, bagels and orange juice or whatever. And Josh and I are standing there with this money. Here's the money they gave us. It's $50 or whatever, worth of T-shirts and CDs. And we're just like, we're pragmatic people, and skinheads was kind of a fact of the matter back then. I think it was on its way down at that time, but dealing with skinheads of one variety or another was a thing that and other gangs, it was a thing you had to deal with being in punk band. And we were not those kind of guys. We also weren't going out of our way to pick fights with people. We were just trying to be a band and, keep alive and, go to the next town. So we were pretty good at dodging, violence, and for the most part. But, there we are at Safeway, standing there. And Josh, I can't remember if I showed it to Josh or Josh showed it to me, but, the subject just came up, Jesus, this is these skinheads' money they gave us. And both Josh and I, we have a firm sense of appreciation for our hard work and the money that was coming to us that was going to, put gas in the car and feed us. So we weren't frivolous with money. But one of us said, I just don't feel good about having this. We put it in a UNICEF jar. So the UNICEF guy collecting that day was like, holy cow, just a bunch of quarters. Like $50 worth of dirty money from skinheads. So there you go. That's
a pretty incredible story.
Memorable, anyway.
There
you go.
Wow, that's a great one. Thank you. I actually got one. I gotta tell you. Now that you told that one, I gotta tell you one. All right.
Let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
So I was in a different band. I've been in a bunch of bands. This wasn't Tsunami Bomb, and in this particular band, the singer was of Jamaican descent. So
okay.
Fantastic singer. Pretty decent band. A little all over the place. We were touring. It was called Love Equals Death. Terrible name, but what can we do? So this is 100 years ago. So we're going to play with Pennywise, where I can't remember if we were opening or supporting them in Santa Barbara. And as we're heading there, our singer says, "Oh man, we're going to get there a little early. Can we stop at my friend's house?" And we're like, yeah, we got some time, sure. And he's like, yeah, I just want to stop and say hey to my friends. This is my very Jamaican descendant singer, very black. And so we go to this house and, pull up, and immediately the guitarist and drummer step out and they get on the phone, and our singer just makes a beeline for the house. And I'm like, hey, actually, I got to use the bathroom. Let me come in there if it's okay. And I walk in, and this, he had told us, he's like, yeah, they're skinheads, but no big deal. And I was like, oh, okay. So we show up and I see, like there's a bunch of skinheads hanging out in this garage. It's a suburban neighborhood, totally mellow. They're all just hanging out, kicking back,
Always a bad sign.
Yeah, it's just, there's a bunch of them in the garage. I can't tell how many, but like one comes out and gives Sean a hug, and he hugs him back. He's like, "Hey man, it's good to see you." And then I ask about the bathroom. They're like, "Yeah, go inside. It's right inside. Go ahead." And they say there's this girl's name like Rebecca or something. Rebecca's in there, just she'll show you. And I was like, okay, so I let myself in this house. It's really nice, very clean. But it's clean, but it's obvious, like kind of a punk rock house, but a clean one. Like it's kind of open and empty, and there's like beer on the counter, and like there's like a guitar amp in the corner and stuff like that. So you can definitely tell it's a punk house, skin house. No big deal. I'm sitting there going like, all right, they're sharps or something, whatever. And there's a skinhead girl. She's totally got a Chelsea on. She's watching TV, and she has like a little baby.
Right.
And I asked her, "Hey, I'm sorry, I just need to use the restroom. They told me to come in." She's like, "Yeah, no problem. Just use it right down the hall." I was like, "Thank you." And I go into the bathroom, and I step out, and I come into the room, and I'm like, "Thank you so much." And I look over at the TV, and she's like, "Yeah, no problem." She's like, "It's in this big sofa chair with the baby." And I look at the TV, and she's watching this black and white movie. And I was a film major, and so I'm looking at this movie, and there's all these
like one of Annie Riefenstahl's movies, right?
Well, no, it was Birth of a Nation, and I'm watching this. It is literally the scene they show all the time, where they show the horses riding and the Ku Klux Klan, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, "Are you watching Birth of a Nation?" And she's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh." And then I look over and I notice this framed photograph of Adolf Hitler on the wall. And then I look behind me and there's this glass case, kind of damaged, but it has a bunch of Nazi memorabilia from World War II.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's that moment where it's like, hey, is there, where's the garage? And she's like, "Oh, you go through that door." And I was like, "Okay, thank you for letting me use the bathroom." And she's like, "Yeah, no problem." And I'm like, I walk out there, and there's there's probably like 10 skinheads all surrounding our singer, who's sitting there drinking a beer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Hey, man, thanks for letting me use the bathroom. Can I talk to you 1 second?" And they're like, and our singer's like, "Yeah, no problem." And so he walks me across the street as I were heading to the van, and I was like, "Those are fucking Nazis!" I was like, "Did you bring us to a Nazi house?" And he's like, "Yeah, but it's cool, man. They're totally cool." And I was like, "How are they totally cool? How are you here right now?"
It can't be cool. It's not cool.
I'm like whisper shrieking. I am literally whisper shrieking at him. I'm like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, what? Where did you bring us? How are you friends with them?" And he's like laughing. He's like, no, it's all good, man. We had a talk one night, and I agreed not to date his sister. He agreed not to date mine. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
That's not. Oh,
I was like,
Lord,
we could be
that.
He's like, I was like, we could be killed.
There you go.
And he's like, no. He's like, I'm good, man. We're good. And I'm like, you're insane. I was like, we got to get to the show, so wrap it up. And I was like,
we got to get the show. I'm pretty sure we have to be at the show right now.
Yeah, so I walk out to the other guys, and they're like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I was like, "Those are Nazis. Like, they're not sharps." And he's like, and the guitarist looks at me. He's like, "How's that work, man? How is Sean friends with Nazis?" And I was like, "They agreed not to date each other's sister. I don't know. I'm not sure how this makes sense. But he just drove us to a Nazi house." And he's like, and they're freaked out, and so they get in the car, and we start driving, and he's like, and our singer's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "You drove us to a Nazi house. That's what's wrong." And he's just like, "What? That's no big deal." So we get to the show, we check in and all this stuff, and then literally, I'm sitting backstage. No. Okay, I'm sitting backstage, and one of the guys with Pennywise's crew comes up. They're all talking, and he's like, "Dude, we might have a problem tonight." And I was like, "What? What's wrong?" And he goes, "And I need to warn you guys." He's like, "There seems to be like a big fucking group of Nazis that just showed up, at this fucking show. And I'm like, they're here to see us. And Pennywise goes, wait, what? And I was like, they are friends of our singer. And I think I took a big drink, and I was like, and they're here to see us. And yeah. And like they're looking at me and they're like, your singer's black. And I was like, I know. I am aware. They are here at his invitation. And they're like,
what is wrong with you people? That's what he's saying.
And he's looking at me. He's like, and I don't remember who it might have. God, I don't remember who it was in Pennywise. One of them was just like, how is that possible? And I'm like, I don't know, but I guess they're gonna not be a problem. I mean, that's what our singer said. He's like, no, don't worry, it's not gonna be a problem. They're gonna watch us and they're gonna leave. They don't even like Pennywise. And I'm like, oh dear God, what have you done? But it was the funniest scene. Like,
crazy.
I'll never forget though the guy going, your singer's black, and I was like, I know. They're still here to see us. It's just like the worst, weirdest.
Wow.
And after you told that story, I had to share it because I was just like, it was one of the weirdest experiences I have ever had.
What? Yeah, you go down some strange rat holes in this business. You really do. You're like, I mean, you're notionally you're dealing. Well, at least then at that time, I think it's a little different now. But you're dealing with fringe people in a fringe culture,
right?
And so there's supposed to be weirdos there, but then you meet people that you're just going, wow, that was surprisingly weird.
Yeah, and I mean, to his credit, our singer, his stance was like, you show people compassion and you kind of understand, you work it out. He goes, they've never tried to attack me, and I just treat them like human beings and kind of show them that, like, I mean, he had a reasoning when he got out to it. I mean, he was a very charming guy, and he's just like, I'm just trying to show him that, people like me, we're all good. And he goes, and if they came to our show, he goes, that's amazing. And nothing happened, nothing went wrong. He goes, they came to a punk rock show to see a black Jamaican American punk rock singer perform. He goes, they came for that. He goes, when would a bunch of Nazi skinheads do that? And I was like, I don't even know what to say.
That's kind of a good point.
Yeah. It was a good point. I mean, it's just, I literally, there has rarely been an incident where I have been baffled the entire 24-hour day. Like, where I've just sat there going... So do you think
he was is he just trying to, he's sort of trying to convert people to a better way of thinking, sort of by... Yeah.
Just by being, not attacking them, not running from them or freaking out, just being friendly and respectful, and he did it. And, like, all of us just sort of sat there, and I have to admit, I mean, we played our show. I didn't see them out in the crowd, but I guess they were, and they left after we played. They told them that they had a great time. They thanked everybody. They said they'd sent their thanks, and they really enjoyed it. And, a bunch of Nazi skinheads came to a show and watched a punk, a dark pop punk band perform with a black singer, and they liked it. And so... I don't know what that led those guys. I never had another run-in with them again. But it was one of the weirdest. Like, I just sat there going, like, they're here to see us. Why are they here to see us?
That is weird. Oh, man. So this same tour, this was in California. I can't remember where, but we ran into, of all things, some Zionist skinheads. And these guys were, I guess, Jewish skinheads. And they were talking about Zion and all this stuff. And they're, we are Zionist skinheads. We're not racist, but they had some kind of worldview. And they offered to beat up those other skinheads from Wichita for us. And I thought, well, 2,500 miles from here. Like, you're not going to go beat those guys. You know, of course, I'm not going to say that. Guys like to beat people up. But, you know, that's it. There's a lot of weird out there.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, I mean, that alone, it's all weird. I don't know, man. But it's a hell of a story to tell.
I don't know either.
It's a hell of a story to tell.
I don't know what those guys are doing now, right? Are they just like, you know, normal guys? Or I don't know. I don't know where they end up. Well, it's funny, you know, one of the things I think is people ask me what's different because now I'm an old man and still going, you know, participating in this stuff a little bit. And I think one of the biggest things that is different here anyway, and I can't speak to other parts of the country because I'm not going to shows in California or Wichita for that matter, the whole violence and the skinhead thing in particular is way down. It's not like the question of skinheads at the shows is not one that it really comes up anymore.
No, but I mean, that's really great to actually hear because, you know, with everything that's happening, you know, politically in our country right now, it's definitely been a weird time, and you kind of wonder. You know, wonder how it's going out there, but that's pretty positive. That's nice to hear. You know, it's just better to just people leave stuff at the door and just kind of have a good time. You know,
I just feel like it's become a much. We were talking about this the other day on the way home from this radio performance, and I think that, you know, one thing I think, well, people who were going to hardcore shows in the 80s. Most of them are in their 50s now, or, you know, some of them are even older than that, and aren't involved in it. But at that time, people were a lot more violent. The shows were violent. The dancing, you know, was violent. You don't see, you saw a lot less of that in the 90s. It was a sort of a softer, cuddly, you know, going from, you know, Black Flag being a leading light of punk to Green Day being a leading light of punk. I mean, the tone and the sort of the tone of it, you know, the negativity was just way down. You know, their hardest day, Green Day was never scary.
No. I had friends say,
and
like,
the audiences.
Oh no, go on.
And the audiences that were coming out. You know, the guys that went to come and see the Stormtroopers of Death play, you know, they wanted to fuck some shit up. They wanted to fight, you know, they wanted to, you know, guys from the military bases and stuff. It was like a real physical, you know, and pretty, it was, I don't think it was always like that, but I think it was a lot more physical and a lot more violent, and a lot more negative. Whereas, you know, today it's very, I mean, it's not just that it's not violent. It's like people are concerned about inclusivity. They want people of all stripes to feel welcome. One of the big, maybe this is just Seattle again, I don't know, but one of the big subjects at the show is, you know, do LGBTQ people feel safe and welcomed in our space? And I think that is such a transformation from, you know, some sketchy punk club in 1986. You know, that's just a very different world.
You've been listening to Ian Hernandez from the band Sicko, Top Drawer Records, and now the Seattle Pop Punk Festival. To find out more about Sicko, check out sicko.com. To find out more about Top Drawer Records, check out tdrecs.com. And if you're interested in catching the Seattle Pop Punk Festival on January 19th and 20th, you can get tickets and find out more information at their Facebook page, facebook.com/the Seattle Pop Punk Festival. And it sounds like it's going to be pretty epic. If you want to find out more about 3 Gigs, check out our website at 3gigspodcast.com. You can find us online at our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram just by searching 3 Gigs or 3 Gigs Podcast. Give us a follow. If you like the show, please also give us a review on our page on iTunes by searching 3 Gigs Podcast. It helps us reach even more people, and it only takes you a moment, and we really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. Our theme song for today is Bad Year by Sicko off the album Laugh While You Can, Monkey Boy, which is an awesome Buckaroo Banzai reference. Points for that. The album is originally on Empty Records. It has now been reissued by Red Scare Records and is out now. My name is Dominic Davey. This has been 3 Gigs. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Take care. If you listen to this podcast, chances are you like music. And if you like music, you probably wear a lot of t-shirts. Or at the very least know someone who does. Well, why not get brand new, blank, fresh, clean t-shirts sent directly to you? Well, you can. FreshCleanTees.com works like a shave club. But instead of razors, they send you super soft, affordable t-shirts. And getting it all going is easy. You choose between monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly delivery options. Answer a few questions about your favorite styles, your size, and what colors you like, and you're good to go. Fresh Clean Tees likes 3 Gigs so much, they have a special offer for all of our listeners. You can head over to freshcleantees.com right now and use promo code GIG for 20% off your very first order. That's promo code GIG at checkout and get 20% off your first order. Now, I love the t-shirts they sent me, and I know you'll love yours. So head over to freshcleantees.com right now and use order code GIG while you can.